Dear friends, Italian and Irish friends, we have a special night tonight for this 17th edition of the series Incontri. And the guests are Professor Constantin Gurdgiev, you can raise your hand, Constantin, who teaches finance and business at the Presidio Graduate School in San Francisco, businessman and director of the Traveling Languages, a unique school of English in Dublin, and Antonio Mantarecchia, who happens to be an experienced stock market investor. I particularly welcome you, Constantin, who by living in California you are the first-hand source of information about unprecedented upheaval in American society and politics. And in fact, America, the USA are no longer what I used to know, because I was highly involved in American environments when I was young and college. So can you tell us what's going on? What has changed this otherwise democratic country, which was the lighthouse of democracy in the world?
Yes, the shining, city on the hill. It has changed dramatically. Comparing, I lived, as you know, for many years in Europe, in Ireland, and I moved between the States and Europe back and forth. Back in the 90s, when I lived in the United States, the notion of the American society, the idea of the American society was much more unifying. The institutions of the American society, both official and cultural institutions, worked in a much more coherent, if you want, way. Since then, and it's really the process which started in the early noughties with the precursor to the Iraq War and onwards, there has been accelerating polarization within the American society. We don't recognize the states anymore as we know the states in the past. Things like the notions of the law and authority, which used to be seen as positive institutions, are now seen as, if you not necessarily negative institutions, but certainly divisive and polarizing institutions. Politics is no longer about ideas or ideals. Whether that's a good idea or bad, that's a different story. But at least it used to be about this. It used to be a differentiation between different candidates in terms of their policies. That has gone away, and I think it's gone away with really back in the mid-noughties, in about, say, 2008 period. We now are into the contest of centrism versus personality-induced politics and personality-driven politics, to the point that it renders the checks and balances systems on which American democracy always relied for centuries to function virtually irrelevant. So what I mean by it is it's not just about the electoral process dysfunctionalities, but it is about the body of politics and the body of decision making. I live in California. We jokingly put California as effectively an independent nation within the United States. But that is also true when you look at the divisions across, say, for example, Midwest, the West, the South of the United States, and the northern coastal states of the United States. That division is evident in the color map that we have out of this election coming out, with the hinterland being red, Republican. And it's not a Republican by ideology. Once again, it is Republican based on personality, on party allegiance, partisanship. That is what happens is in any society. Once the ideals and ideas, once ethics and principles of society start getting shifted to the second stage in terms of a second, if you want, role in decision making, what replaces them is populism. And we are seeing that here in the United States. And it is a society which is sadly really torn apart. We turned this election, instead of being a definitive vote for, say, return to policy normality, return to, if you want, good governance and good governance ethics and institutional governance as well. We turned it into the contest between the not Trump on one side and Trump on the other side. And as a result of that, we are coming out of this election ever more divided, ever more polarized, and ever more dysfunctional when it comes to big challenges that this society, like any other modern society, is facing. If you look at, for example, preferences of the voters gathered from the exit opinion polls, dominant concerns of the voters in the United States have been economy, coronavirus. Bigger themes like, say, for example, environment or social justice have not played a role almost at all within the elections. So we are a society which is not geared towards facing the future. We are the society which is still trying to deal with the fallout, massive fallout from the past.
Yes. Okay. Any questions, Salvatore, for example?
Well, I might take the opportunity to probably try to put a different, not a different point of view, but more a sort of challenge a little bit what you just said, okay, somehow, okay, in the sense that it could have been the case that probably even the way democracy is functioning in the US is becoming not suitable anymore in the way we live today. I'll give you an example. The electoral system in the US just simply assign all the candidates to either one side or the other side for each state, okay, except a few small exceptions, okay. And it's also like building division at the end of the day, because like that people in that from a specific country, they feel not represented if they vote for the other side, and they're not represented at all from the people elected in the specific nation. So maybe the system has to move forward to match what the new way of living is.
Yes, there is a debate about this idea of the electoral college being an outdated institution, and there are both positives and negatives of the electoral college. So, for example, if you look at the current map in terms of the popular votes, it's very clear that the urban and suburban concentrations, less so suburban because there's a bit more heterogeneity, there's a bit more mosaic, but urban concentrations certainly vote predominantly Democrat, and it's not just in this election. And you have the rural, super rural, and parts of suburban communities, which generally tend to be voting red, Republican. I think that in the end, the way it is panning out right now, actually there is more clarity in a popular vote rather than in electoral votes themselves. That said, there's always a debate in the United States, and it's not new, not anchored to current elections, whether you want to disproportionately overrepresent the majoritarian rule in politics and in democracy, as opposed to the Republican rule in politics and democracy. And this is about the tyranny of democracy, yes, which is certainly been a concern by the founding fathers in the United States, and certainly led to the development of this electoral system with electoral votes. I'm not a proponent of that system, by the way, but I think the fundamental problem from the American society is not the institutions of the election, but rather the institutions of political power and the interlinks between the so-called separate, if you want, checks and balances institutions that has gone on for decades now through the presidential powers, through the legislative powers, has created effectively a massive incumbent barrier to entry in politics. So as a result of that, from a kind of thinking in economic terms, there's no competition coming in. It is two-party system, which is a problem, rather than the electoral vote system, which is a problem. Now, electoral vote system reinforces two-party system because it gives, effectively winner takes all type of structure, yes, in elections. But that's a secondary consideration. I think the biggest consideration is that the United States exists in a world of two-party system. And that has been reinforced in the last elections. And in fact, actually, as the outcome of 2016, I think very dangerous outcome of 2016, there is a general perception amongst the establishment within the United States that any vote outside of the two-party system vote is somehow subversive to the system of the American democracy. To me, coming from European perspective, having an opportunity for people to express their views across a range of parties leads to greater enfranchisement of voters and greater participation by voters. In other words, yes, there are people we disagree with politically, but they need to have also a voice in the system. And that voice comes on foot of having multiple parties, having the competition between the parties. And that's what's lacking in the US to me.
Constantin, if I may interfere now, Trump, of course, is in the history of the world, not only the United States, is the most hated and the most loved president, which is amazing, as if America is divided in two, 50-50. Now, in details, what chance has he got in his claim to resort to the Supreme Court for annulling the late count of votes? I mean, isn't it something funny? It seems to me as if he's trying to set up a scene, an environment which is typical of third world countries where there is corruption for real, without any substance.
I think the issue that he's raising of corruption and the violation of electoral laws is an issue that has been raised by him in 2016. Even though he won, he did try to contest, kind of legitimacy of the popular vote that Hillary Rodham Clinton got. But I think he doesn't have any legal grounds to stand on right now. There is no evidence of systemic fraud. He has the rights to exercise as the candidate in terms of demanding the recounts.
But stopping the counting, that's recounting. It happens in every country, as you know.
So he's not going to stop the recount. He's not going to stop the counts. Okay. The states have independent authority there, and they will continue proceeding with the counts. It's pretty clear that he has lost at this stage. Because it's simply impossible for him to get to the electoral votes he needs to get. It also is fairly clear that the Republican-dominated legislatures, state legislatures, are not going to reverse the votes because they constitutionally cannot do so unless there is a hung election. He is betting on the idea that there is a widespread fraud. I do genuinely think that he believes so to be. I think he is deluded in that sense. There hasn't been in the past significant enough amount of mistaken or fraudulent ballots cast in any past elections, and I don't think in these elections there will be any difference as well. So I think at this stage, it's fairly safe to say he's lost, and he doesn't have a path to claw back out of that. But he will challenge. I mean, we know already he's challenging Michigan, he's challenging Wisconsin. Georgia announced today that they are going to hold a recount. We know that he will probably challenge Pennsylvania as well, Arizona. It's on a daily basis, and Nevada as well. It's on a daily basis that they're adding new challenges. That's okay. That's how democracy works. Yes, there is time to do that. Sure. It's an important, if you want, point of reaffirming that the process actually is fair and executed professionally, which it is. I mean, it's amazing to see, like, say, for example, in challenges like in Pennsylvania, where there is legal restrictions in terms of when you can start counting the votes which arrive through mail ballots, how those systems do operate. You know, they're very heterogeneous. There is no unified electoral system within the United States.
In any case, he has no chance of making it.
I don't think he has any chance, and I don't think he has any ground to stand in terms of his claims of fraud at all.
Irregular fraud, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Constantin, now we move on to another sphere of considerations, and that is the impact on the financial world, on the economic growth, etc., etc. And I think Antonio has some question along this line. Can you ask?
Okay, yes. Okay, first of all, let me say that I'm not that much into politics, and I don't care much about who is going to win in these elections, even if, let me say, I'm a Trump supporter. Anyway, this is my opinion for the stability of the entire world Okay, this is my opinion for the stability of the entire world. Now, if I enter into the question themselves, I wrote it simply because I wanted to be more precise. So basically, it's one question that has three questions inside. Okay.
Okay.
So the first, let me say, and then we can do one by one, or you can do all in one go. So, are we at the end of the American? Are we at the end of the American petrodollar cycle? This is my first question. Are we witnessing the end of the USA as the world main power? And then, are the USA at risk civil war for real? This is also interesting me, let me say, as an investor, because obviously we all know that United States are the main economical power in the world, so they rule the world, and what can cause an hypothetical civil war in the United States. So this is my question.
I'll try to tackle all of them together because I can see how they relate. Okay. And I think it's very important questions in terms of the longer term perspective. In the short run, we don't have a substitute for dollar right now. But in the short run also, we're already witnessing, if you want, chipping away at the American hegemony, both economic hegemony and geopolitical hegemony. And the challenges of this kind of process are going to accelerate as the world becomes more and more multipolar. It's crucial from my point of view that the European Union realizes that. And I think European Union is realizing that, because it's not only opportunity for the likes of the European Union to develop a cogent counterpoint of economic development, financial development, and also social development to the United States. But I also think it is very important for the Western democratic systems to have European Union as the, not necessarily a follower of the United States, but rather a leader in this multipolar world. So in terms of the United States position going forward, it is significantly weakened. It's weakened not so much by the economic, if you want, dynamic. Yes, we are all in the recession. Yes, we are all in the non-V-shaped recovery. United States seems to be faring better than, say, for example, EU. But that's not going anywhere. It's temporary period really. Looking forward, okay, the United States is losing the ground across the dimensions of potential for growth into the future, and that is true not only for the United States. It's true for all of the advanced economies, and this is driven by the forces that predate the coronavirus and predate the elections, and in fact, actually, probably the elections themselves are one of the outcomes or corollaries of it. It's the process of twin secular stagnations, which is, to me as an economist, is a dominant theme going forward into the next couple of decades. And that's demographic, but it also relates to the technological innovation cycle and the growth potential in the economies being slowing down on foot of decline in productivity across all of the factors of productivity. Again, this is not new. Again, that adds to the, if you want, decline of the unipolar type of world in the economies and in financial services as well. But it also pits United States geopolitical positioning against the longer term objectives of the economy of the United States. In other words, being the policeman to the rest of the world, being the enforcer of the Bretton Woods system, is now extremely costly for the United States. Not just costly in money terms. I don't mean in money terms alone. I mean in terms of the future potential for development. What's interesting is that the coronavirus pandemic is teaching us something that we haven't really thought about before, and that is the precautionary principle reaction of institutions, whether they are national institutions or even at organizational level for companies or individual organizations themselves, strategic responses to the systemic uncertainty. What I mean by it is that we've learned from the coronavirus already. We are still adapting to that lesson, but we already learned that we have structural vulnerabilities in the way we, organize our activities. Okay, what I mean by it is production processes, reliance on a certain mix of technological capital versus physical capital versus human capital in the organization of our institutions, from households all the way up to the national level institutions. And we're going to start gradually absorbing this lesson by reducing our economic reliance on human capital. And in that setting, United States is certainly behind the curve in terms of its economic development and its economic institutions than, say, for example, parts of Asia Pacific. Part of that is due to the fact that the United States economy is based on the increasingly false premises of competition, which is declining the technological innovation. But part of that is also due to the fact that the United States, like other advanced economies or Western economies, has legacy institutions. And with legacy institutions, innovation is always curtailed, yes? Both institutional and technological innovation is always curtailed or held back by the fact that you need to integrate existing institutions into the new technological processes, new technological world, and so forth. So,
okay. Sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, probably. I can talk about that for an hour.
I can say you're a lecturer. So, Salvatore, any pretext to ask a question on what she has said?
First of all, I was saying, like, I was nearly enjoying the lecture anyway, so it was absolutely, absolutely phenomenal. Okay, so I would have stopped myself, to be honest with you. But no, like I actually really like the point it just explained. Okay, regarding the issue that we're facing now with the two systems, like the needs now, the three pillars of our processes that now need to readapt. Okay, and now we're definitely probably moving away from the American problem, but it's probably just a more definitely a wider problem. Okay, and my main question, I hope you can get a short answer, even if I know it will be very difficult. Okay, but it would be: would you now see, like as you mentioned, of course, we are kind of reducing the human part of it as a reaction of coronavirus, of course. What do you think is going to happen now, like in the short term, on this matter, in the sense that will these reduction means, of course, in a very short term, unemployment and probably somehow the stabilization of societies. Okay, but
Yes.
will these readapt somehow very quickly, as coronavirus will ease off hopefully within maybe a couple of years, let's say? Okay, or it could be like just the beginning of a new, even a new revolution in terms of a new world.
I think it is the latter. And I think the coronavirus is just this pinpoint prick which deflates the entire structure that we had before. I think that we are realizing now the degree of vulnerability we have in human-centric systems. And as a result of that, we are in the long run on the path of continued displacement of not just labor, but human capital, which is crucial, out of the productive parts and decision-making processes. To me, it's a very dangerous process because it will lead to the polarization and, if you want, to the drawing out of this whole, if you look at Piketty's studies, this whole difference between the R versus G, the rate of growth in capital versus the returns versus the rate of growth in the economy. We don't have any institutional way of thinking about that right now. The universal basic income is a kind of really the first stage response to the what we would call a absolutely fundamental change in the society.
In other words, Constantin, sorry for interrupting you. We are actually we're not prepared. We're not geared.
No, we're absolutely not geared, and it will.
That's the big impact. Now, I would like, before we leave you, because time is getting there, I would like to ask my friend Antonio, why are you a supporter of, you must have a reason, of Trump? What appeals to you about Trump?
What I like of Trump are the last 4 years of Trump presidency, okay?
Yeah.
And if I analyze, let me say, the 8 years of Obama, they cause more troubles around the world without a pandemic, let me say, than the last 4 years with Trump with a pandemic, let me say. If I analyze also the economic growth, for example, I can also say Trump have done very well. We are talking about the American economy. We are not talking about the European one. That is totally different.
Yeah, well, he's done that.
Then I might say,
I suppose Constantin will agree with that.
Look, in terms of the American economy performance during the Trump administration, it's very easy to think in terms of the headline numbers, as it did outperform the European Union. But in terms of the underlying effect of that growth and the distribution of that growth within the society, let's look at it from the point of view of life satisfaction, the quality of life measures, the quality of the institutional outcomes, like, say, for example, healthcare. United States, and this is not to blame Trump, administration for it, but it is also under the Trump administration happened. United States currently is the only country amongst the advanced economies that has shrinking life expectancy. It is the outlier in terms of the child mortality. It is the outlier in terms of the life expectancy for those who are under 65 years of age. And, there's many complex causes for it. But, say, for example, when we talk about Obama administration, I'm the biggest fan of Obama, never was. When you look at the Obama healthcare reforms, they were in the step in the right direction. They did increase coverage in terms of the people with insurance. They decreased or reduced the quality of insurance in the sense that there is more now underinsured Americans rather than uninsured Americans. So it is a complex picture. And the American economy in itself, looking at it from the ground up, and that's the only, by the way to look at the economy, not from the Wall Street point of view, but from the bottom up, is a disaster. It's an economy which is dominated by disappearance, by processes such as disappearance of the middle class. It is the economy where the lower middle classes have fallen into poverty traps completely. It's an economy which used to be based on the American dream, and that American dream is out of the window across the board, from entrepreneurship, becoming more embedded into the kind of haves parts of the society rather than the regional ones of have-nots. That traditional model of American entrepreneurship, look at for example, migration systems in the United States. They're utterly dysfunctional. Again, that's not to blame Trump for it. He inherited all of that, but he didn't contribute positively to that. I mean, the US migration system did not become any more meritocratic or any more open during his administration. It became less so. There's a way to look at GDP numbers, but some of you are based in Ireland, and when you look at GDP numbers, it's an illusion. It's not a true measure of the economy. The growth rates, look at, for example, BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics reporting on employment and unemployment, which should be a straightforward number. It's heavily manipulated, not only heavily manipulated, but it's also loaded with biases. We know that. They admit it themselves. We as economists, kind of use it as the indicator rather than a true metric, of what's happening. So I don't really think that the assessment of the US economy as being stronger, or even in comparison to the much weaker on the growth side economies like, say, Japan, is really a valid comparison anymore. We live in a completely different world of much more complex analysis of social outcomes of the economy, of social mobility space within the economy, and so forth.
Well, okay, now we are reaching the end of our conversation, and what we hope now is that whatever happens in America, things go a bit straighter.
I think it is a hope for the entire 2020. This year.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So at this stage, all I say is thank you very much for taking part in this very, very nice meeting we have had. One of the best. This is the 17th. So it will go down in history as the best. And thank you very, very much, Constantin, for accepting to talk to us. And possibly we'll ask you again, because when the new president is elected, we'll see maybe there is some pretext to have you back. Okay, well,
Concerto.
bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Antonio,
much.
Salvatore.
To all of it.
Thanks,
See you,
Constantin,
Jerry.
for the call. Thanks,
Thanks.
Francesco.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.